This is the Gerry Callahan Show.
Well, they did it. They sucked me in. I was holding out for a month, and I said, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to get into this Alex Murdaugh trial. I wasn't watching. I didn't get into any of the Netflix documentary or the Apple or Amazon or whatever else. There's been a couple of documentaries, and some people are just riveted, just enthralled by this trial. Oh, at least they were. But they did it on the last 2 days. I suddenly started paying attention because I didn't get it. I didn't quite understand where the suspense was. I mean, I watched Murdaugh, this psycho, this absolute monster, take the stand for hours and just pretend, just play act, like put on a performance. He was a pretty good actor, had a good accent, cried on cue, but I still didn't get it. All the evidence was there before him. He got caught lying 9,000 times. As far as I could tell, his defense was, I lied about everything, but I'm telling the truth now. I don't think that's a great defense. He said he was a drug addict, a thief, and a liar, but you can trust me now. I just kept going back to the old Bob Arum moment when Bob Arum was promoting some fight, and one day he told the story about a fighter, and the next day he told a totally different story, and somebody in the media raised their hand and said, why should we believe you when you told a different story yesterday? And he said, well, that's because I was lying yesterday. I'm telling the truth today. Arum was pretty honest to that moment, but why should we believe anything Alex Murdaugh said? Why should we? Why should the jury? Why should anybody? Here's the problem, is when you have a high-profile trial on TV and all the networks bringing in their experts, their defense attorneys, they think it's a game. This happened during most high-profile trials. It happened during OJ. Defense attorneys want there to be doubt. They want there to be debate. They want it to be a struggle. They want the jury to go back and deliberate for hours, for days. And it's like you want a good game when you're tuning into the Super Bowl. You don't want a blowout. Well, this was a blowout, and these defense attorneys were all full of it. They talked about what a great job he did on the stand and how he created reasonable doubt, and many of them were predicting a not guilty verdict. And I'm sitting there going, wait a second, I don't care what he did on the stand. I don't care how much you want this to be dramatic. The evidence was overwhelming. Any moron could see it. This was not an OJ jury. OJ's jury was a bunch of morons who were under the spell of OJ's high-profile, highly paid defense team. They did the whole jury nullification thing where they said the cops were dirty and they planted evidence, and they did it because he's black. And they got a bunch of jurors. They got all the jurors to fall for it. That was the exception to the rule. I'm going to guess in most trials, the ones that aren't on TV, jurors listen to the evidence, they listen to the testimony, they make a decision, they usually get it right. There was no way they were going to let him walk. Maybe they'd get one crazy juror to hang out, to hold out, and they would get a hung jury. But that would be an upset. That would be a surprise. If you didn't pay attention to the 6 weeks of the trial, of the 76 witnesses, all you need to know is that he was caught lying about where he was and what he was doing during the murder. It's not, he was caught lying 1,000 different times, and he admitted he's a liar and a crook and a fraud and a con artist and a drug addict. But when you lie about where you were when the actual shooting occurred, I'm going to say that your case kind of falls apart, and his case fell apart completely. And if you listen to these experts and analysts, you were fooled. You were conned. There was never any doubt. There was never any drama. It was a good TV show because of the power and the fame and the money and the prominence of the family. There was a lot of discussion about how this family could fix things. We could talk about the son, the dead son, Pawpaw, who killed a beautiful young 19-year-old girl in a drunken boating accident, and how his father, Alex, and his grandfather tried to fix it, how they went room to room in the hospital, trying to convince the kids who were on the boat when Pawpaw drunkenly crashed the boat, killing this young girl. They went room to room asking the other kids to lie and say Paul wasn't driving the boat. These are corrupt, vile, awful, evil people, including Maggie and Pawpaw. The whole bunch of them were just privileged, spoiled, entitled punks and pukes and just awful, awful people. By the way, Turtle Boy pointed that out on Twitter, said, who cares about these people? They were all bad people. Well, Mom and Pawpaw were bad people, but they weren't evil murderers. Well, weren't first-degree murderers. They didn't shoot their loved ones in the face like this scumbag. I think in the end, you know what it was? A profile of an evil man, pure evil. And it came out in the trial. Think about this. His defense team, highly paid defense team, I believe one of them was a state senator, all connected, all powerful, probably fixed cases in the past, but it's hard to fix a double murder. Think of this. In the trial, we learned that he ripped off everybody. He stole $9 million from his law firm. He stole money from a paraplegic who was awarded millions in a case. The paraplegic was deaf. I mean, I'm sorry, he's a quadriplegic, a deaf quadriplegic, and this scumbag stole his money. His housekeeper, longtime loyal housekeeper, died on his property, falling down the stairs. I wonder if they're going to reopen that case. Her kids won $3 million, I believe, from the insurance company. He stole that. He stole from the kids of his own housekeeper who died on his property, falling down the stairs. I can't imagine a worse defendant, a guy with a worse reputation or a worse character, just the absolute worst. There was never any chance, despite what Alan Dershowitz and Janine Pirro told you. It didn't matter how well he acted on the stand. There was a mountain of evidence against him. I mean, just pick one thing that they learned. First of all, he said he wasn't there. Later, we learned from his son's Snapchat on his phone that he was there. You heard his voice. He had to admit, yeah, I guess I was there. His excuse every time he got caught lying was, hey, I was on drugs. He had a $50,000 a week oxycodone habit. He was taking, I don't know what the number was, taking dozens and dozens of pills every day. That's too bad. That's not an excuse for murder. It's not an excuse for anything. But I think the best evidence that just incriminated him beyond a reasonable doubt was that the dog that was out, I don't know, it's kind of a finer point, but the dog that was out when the murder occurred was in its kennel, in its pen, when the cops arrived. And then he claimed, two crazed gunmen with two different guns shot his wife and son, maybe because of revenge for the boat accident. So you're telling me they murdered two people in cold blood and they took the time to put the dog away? That's something a stranger would never, ever do. Only the killer would do. On top of that, I mean, I got the list here. It's incredible. On top of that, the two guns used were one was his favorite gun. One was his father's favorite gun. They've matched shell casings on the property because they hunted to the casings at the scene. That doesn't help when you try to explain that it was a stranger. And then he had his friend fake shoot him in the head. He faked an attack. He hired a guy he knew, a guy who'd worked for him before, to shoot him. He grazed him along the side of the head and pretended that was, involved. That was perhaps the same crew that shot his wife and his son. The only thing that made it seem possible that some juror could sympathize was because it was so sick and twisted and evil. You shoot your own 22-year-old son in the chest and in the face with a shotgun. You shoot your own wife, who, by the way, was speaking to a divorce lawyer, if you want to look for motive. I mean, the motive for everything this guy did was money and drugs. And the property was in her name, and she was talking to a divorce lawyer. What more could the prosecution do? This was an absolute blowout. This was, the 86 Super Bowl, the Bears against the Patriots. There was never any suspense, never any doubt. I'm glad I didn't devote a month to this trial because it was a slam dunk. The only thing intriguing is looking at a guy who had it all, who was fabulously wealthy and who was connected and had, family and a hunting ranch and boats and everything else, and saying, why would he throw that all away? And they laid out the case for money. The day he shot his wife and kid, the CFO of his law firm confronted him and said, we know what you've done. We know how much money you've stolen. We're going to have to change the name of the law firm. You're out. So the day they catch him stealing, embezzling, and the day his son and his wife want to confront him about his drug use and his stealing all the money, the day they weren't going to confront him, he decides to shoot them in the face and the chest and kill them, and then claims, who knows who it was, probably some stranger who was upset about the boat accident. The whole thing was a slam dunk. The whole thing was a blowout. And again, I know the fact that they're a well-connected, rich family. They had to take his grandfather's portrait, his whole family, a whole line of, lawyers and judges. His grandfather's portrait was on the wall in the courtroom. They had to take it down for the trial. That's how connected. That's how far back his family goes in this community. But there's a reason it took a few minutes for them to reach a verdict, because it was so easy. I mean, they had no doubt. The only thing that surprised me is a juror appeared on Good Morning America this morning. Oh, by the way, we are waiting for the sentencing. He's sitting in court as we speak. If you're watching live, we will let you know. He's sitting in court in his jumpsuit, prison jumpsuit, waiting, stone-faced, staring at the judge, waiting for the sentence, which is, again, just a formality. He can get, the minimum he can get is 30 years. He's 54. He will die in prison. The maximum is life. I assume this judge, who doesn't mess around. That was another interesting tidbit from the judge. After the trial, when they sent, after all the testimony and the closing statements, they sent the jury to deliberate. He said, "You're not getting dinner." He sent them back there with coffee and crackers, apparently, and said, let's make this quick, because he knew what was going on. They knew what was going on. There wasn't going to be any drama, even though all the TV cameras were there, even though Nancy Grace and every other, TV expert, analyst, lawyer wanted drama. They wanted this to be OJ. We'll get to OJ. Can't have a jury, can't have a murder trial without the ultimate expert, OJ Simpson, chiming in. But what's this juror's name? You got it there?
Craig Mahoney, I believe.
A juror appears on Good Morning America. Obviously, they're free to speak now. And he tells, it was kind of a big deal last night that allegedly only took 3 hours for the jury. He says it took 45 minutes. I mean, that's barely enough time to take the roll. But he also said something I thought was pretty interesting, that when they first got to the jury room, 2 jurors were ready to vote not guilty. 2. I thought there might be 1 holdout, but 2. And fortunately, the cooler, smarter heads prevailed, and they convinced the 2 holdouts to flip and vote to convict in 45 minutes. They were hungry. They wanted to go home, and I don't blame them. The idea that this was ever going to be a hung jury or a not guilty is just absurd. There was just a tidal wave of evidence against the guy. He obviously did it. There was no doubt, despite what Netflix and Apple and whoever else made documentaries want you to believe there was no suspense. This is just one real sick, evil, drugged out monster who shot his own child and shot his wife. That blows my, as somebody pointed this out, analyzing the trial, they see lots of trials where husbands kill their wives, particularly wives who are speaking to a divorce lawyer, wives who own the property, and this guy's in serious financial trouble. But his son, your 22-year-old son, guy who looks like you, apparently acts like you, thinks he's entitled, but you shoot your own son and then claim and think somehow that's going to solve your problem. I guess that's the only thing that had people scratching their heads was, how could someone do this? How could a human being do this? But God knows we see lots of evil in the world, and we saw evil, 6'4" red-headed evil on the stand. We see him now sitting in court. It's the last time we'll see him probably for a long, long time. But